There was a new report that came out over the weekend that said lawmakers introduced bill to block LLPA fee changes. Sponsors say the bill will prevent harm to home buyers with good credit. So, Steve, this is really interesting. I want to just tee this up, get into a little bit of the article, and then we'll discuss it. But I think that, there's two sides to everything. There's two sides to everything. And now you have a whole uproar of people that are like, no, this just isn't right. This just isn't right. And so there are a bunch of people in the House who recently introduced a bill that, if passed, would block changes to the Federal Housing Finance Agency's loan level pricing adjustment fees charged by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Here's what they said. The bill, known as the Responsible Borrower Protection Act of 2023, pretty cool name, would cancel certain proposed changes to credit fees charged by the Federal National Mortgage Association and the FHFA. The FHFA, led by President Biden appointed director, is punishing financially responsible mortgage borrowers. This is what one of the reps from the House said in a statement. He went on to say, their agenda of equity over equality defies common sense and will endanger the stability of the housing market. I hear on a regular basis constituents about the high cost of housing, which has been exacerbated by the insane interest rates imposed to combat Biden's skyrocketing inflation. If these new rules are implemented, the FHFA fee could result in thousands of dollars in additional fees for lower risk homeowners over time, while encouraging and rewarding financially irresponsible home buyers. What were your thoughts when you read this?
It kind of reminds me of, so we both have kids, right? And I'm sorry if there's an echo, by the way. I'm just now realizing that I'm in a different space today. But anyway, so it reminds me of, like, when your kids, like, if one of your kids does something bad and they're in trouble, and then your other kids are like, would it be okay if I cleaned my bathroom without you asking?
Right.
It's the same thing. This comes with, like, okay, it comes with the politicalization, right? Like, they're politicizing this because they're adding Joe Biden's name to it. And the president, or the person that runs the FHFA, is appointed by the president. And for all that it serves, like, I am all for lowering fees. Like, I don't like these fees. I just had a conversation with the borrower this morning that was freaking out about it. I'm like, you have an 802 credit score. It doesn't impact you, but they're still pissed that, they still think, they're like, well, I'm paying more because I have good credit to help people with bad credit. The problem with this latest move in this new act, though, is it's typical politics. Same thing that the Fed's doing right now, right? The Fed is continuing to raise rates and looking in the rear view mirror to see if it's working. And these people, like, this is all stuff we knew about in January or February. And none of them said a word, like, none of these constituents said a word about the borrowing cost or said anything about the cost of housing or anything until they tagged Joe Biden in it and made it this big news story. Like, if these politicians really cared, they would have listened to their constituents, I guess, back before it had Joe Biden's name attached to it, or however you're going to do it. In my opinion, I hope it works. I hope they can block it. There was another part of this that was based on a borrower's debt to income ratio. If you were over 40% debt to income ratio, you paid an extra 3/8 of a point, or 0.375, or $375 for every $100,000 borrowed. And they removed that. They redacted that and delayed the implementation of that fee until a later date. A couple of years ago, when second homes, they were priced, normally a second home had the same rates and fees as a primary home. And then Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac now allow you to rent a second home. Well, then a year later, they're like, okay, well, now we're going to make the fees for a second home the same as a rental home. Well, they had a bunch of people push back on that, and they delayed it, went back and forth, did some political stuff, and then they eventually added it back. But they went after these costs in these different parts of these things immediately. And I think where we're going to run into a lot of issues, and where this is, like, as we've heard before in politics, it's a nothing burger. And the reason that we run into that is because we have people closing now paying these higher fees because, like we talked about before, rate locks that are closing right now, there's no guarantee that these loans are going to be delivered to Fannie Mae by May 1st. They're probably, a loan closing today may not make it to Fannie Mae until 3 weeks from now. And so people, so what do? Are you going to go back and refund all the people now that have already paid those fees? Like,
Mm.
again, it's just acting late. I hope it does something. I think they're in the right. I don't think you have to charge the good credit borrowers more in order to capture more of that lower credit market, especially when there's different ways to get away from those fees with, area median incomes, first time buyer programs, and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two, yeah, well said, by the way. And I think that there are two sides to the story. And, Sandra Thomas, who is the director of the why is it so hard to say?
Because you want to
FHFA.
say FHA.
Yeah, it's just the worst.
Yeah.
So, obviously, she's defending the position of the agency. And she came out and recently said that the information circulating about more expensive LLP fees for higher credit borrowers are just misconceptions. She said that higher credit score borrowers are not being charged more so that lower credit score borrowers can pay less. That's what she said in her recent statement. So that's one side of it. The other
Yeah.
side is arguing, well, that is exactly what this is doing. And so when we looked at the pricing sheet of last week, and I'm not going to pull that up again, how do you see it? I mean, those are the two arguments. One side saying, no, absolutely not. The other side saying, well, how is it not? You only increased the fees with people that the most common buyer, 720 credit
Right.
score, 20% down. They got hit the hardest in this implementation of this new fee. And the people that have low credit, putting the least amount down, they have an incentive. So I guess let's take that argument. How isn't it that?
Right.
Or,
The reason it's not that, and the reason that we're having this conversation is very simple. It's the fact that the FHFA is raising prices. They're like, we want to make more money. And we are not going to say that we are raising prices to make more money for whatever reason they're making or they want to make more money. Like, if you think about it, if you say, okay, we're going to raise prices to mitigate risk, right? So that would be like, what's the risk that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac take? It's foreclosure, right?
yeah,
It's default.
absolutely.
That's how
Yeah.
Fannie Mae and Freddie, like. So tell me, like, what have we talked about, like, with default rates in the last, I don't know, 28 months? What do those look like, right?
Right.
It's not even worth having a conversation. And so what they've done is they've gone through and they've raised their prices. And the one thing so these are risk factors, right? Loan level pricing adjustments, they offset risk. And if there's no loss from risk, but you still want to make more money on it and you don't give a reason for it, and then you have, the news media come in and attach a politicized reason to it, all you have to do, and maybe from my perspective and the way I see it, is say it's not what you think, and that's it, right? They still have, like, this whole thing would go away if they said why they're doing this. Like, is this so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac can be more profitable? I don't know why they won't say that.
Because, yeah, no, that's a really good point, because without saying that, you leave people to question, right? And this is what people are
100%.
questioning. I'm bringing this up yet again. And it is abundantly clear to any human to look at this price sheet and say, okay, red is bad, green is good, right? Like, you learn that, I don't know, maybe kindergarten or something. And you say, okay, who's got the red? Who's getting hit the worst? And it is people with a credit score of 720 to 760 that are putting 20% down. And then who is benefiting the most from this? People with the lowest credit score putting the least amount down.
Or
How
is
would
putting
it
less down.
less down? Thank you. How would one argue the other point? And I'm not saying you have to agree with one or the other, Steve. I'm asking.
Yeah.
We just talked about the argument of the people who say this is absolutely hurting people with higher credit. We are absolutely increasing the cost versus what these people were paying last year. They are paying more. That is absolutely happening. And the people that have been maybe less responsible with their credit get a break. So we talked about the people that are making that argument.
Yeah.
How is it possible that people can counter argue and say that that is not what's happening here?
I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I mean, it's because there's no reason given. There's no other applicable argument, right? So you're saying, what's the argument for people? The argument
Well, let's just hear.
against
Let me tee
credit
this up even more.
subsidizing bad credit, right?
Yeah, you said something on the show last week that I think is important, and I'll bring that back up to maybe tee it up even better. But what the director is saying, what Sandra Thomas is saying is these are just misconceptions. We are not, and I quote, higher credit score borrowers are not being charged more so that lower credit score borrowers can pay less. That is not what is happening. So that is her quote. You said something really good on both shows. You've been eating your Wheaties lately. Today is that you said, well, it's just their way of making more money. And then last week, and by not saying that, you leave people to question. And then last week, you said something profound that I still have been thinking about all weekend, which is, and I need to share my screen on this because it's important for people to get context. This is what really hit me hard last week when you said what you said. Is that these people that on a sheet look like they are benefiting, they can't get that loan anyway. What you said last week was people with less than a 639 credit score putting 3% down don't even get to benefit from this pricing benefit because all those folks have to end up going FHA. And so I think that just helps. I don't know. I think that maybe just helps the people that are making the argument that this is in fact just hurting the people that have good credit that are putting more down. I don't understand how she could say that it's not.
Exactly. I mean, and so her statement right there that you've read twice now on this, where she's like, we're not raising prices for good credit so as to be able to lower the fees for other people. And that's it. And that's true. That's not what they're doing. She's not wrong. That's not at all what they're doing. And they know that if they really wanted this to benefit lower credit people, they would say, okay, we're going to lower the credit. We're going to lower these credit costs by this amount. Mind you, that person's still paying 2.5% of the loan amount, right? They're still paying 2.5 points on that loan size, right? They're still getting hit hard. They'd also say, but in conjunction with that, to really help the equitable distribution of homeownership, we have changed the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac automated underwriting approval system algorithm to look at these borrowers as being underserved and making approvals smoother for them. And so we're going to give more approvals rather than less than 1% of that borrower profile getting an approval. So again, they're sitting there and it drives me bananas just because I'm the type, like, if you're going to charge more, just charge more money. Yeah. Everything is more expensive right now, right? Like everything costs more. And that's just the world we're living in. And we're kind of used to it, unfortunately, right? So I think forget what the Fed calls that, where when inflation really sets in and we don't care anymore. We're just like, yeah, this is the world we live in. But instead, they're masking it with, hey, we're doing all this just to say that they're doing this for an equitable distribution or to help an underserved community, when they're not doing shit to help an underserved. They're literally doing nothing to help an underserved community other than pumping their tires full of air and their balloons and getting them all excited. And they're like, hey, I'm going to call you. We want to get a conventional loan. We don't want the FHA loan like bad credit borrowers get and get all these bad deals. Like, we want the conventional. We want the gold standard. I'm like, okay, this is great. We type them in. We're like, okay, so let me tell you about the FHA terms that we're going to do your loan on today, because it makes way more sense than the conventional loan. Again, it goes back to it. And I know we're preaching to the choir, right? Like, of course, that's what the mainstream media does. And that's what politics does. And that's what all this stuff does. Is it's never what it actually seems. And in this case, it's just simply them charging more money. There's no argument for it either way, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting nonetheless. I mean, I think you mentioned, and we'll see what happens this week, more states piling on with
Yeah.
this with this new bill. I don't know how fast this thing will move. I mean, it's in effect today, right? Today's May 1st. I
Yes.
mean,
So
it's
all won't. Yeah. But again, if you're watching this and you're a real estate agent and you have people locked in rates and transactions happening, or you have people that are pre-approved, or you're a home buyer, you're any of those things, like this is all already being accounted for. Like this is already included in your cash to close estimates. It's already included in your rates and your payments and all that stuff. So this is not, if you're in process and you're going to close next week, you're not paying more than you were yesterday. Like this is
right,
already all
right, right.
posted.
Because when you're pricing a loan out, yeah, it's built in, it's there
It's
already.
been there since March. So this isn't
Hmm.
something new. So
Yeah,
the way they were doing it is if it was priced in March, and then depending on when your rate lock was and your closing was, if the lender felt confident that they were going to get it delivered to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, then they would back those fees out before closing. So you're getting surprised the other way. You're getting surprised to your benefit with fees than you were being surprised, to the downside.
well, that's another interesting point. Is like it's really good what you just said in that. Like you're not buying two houses in the matter of 60 days. It's not like you're saying, okay, the house I bought 2 months ago, I only paid this in points, and now this one I paid this in points. Borrowers don't have anything to compare to, and to your point, it is what it is. It's not, you don't have a choice in the matter.
Right.
It's just it's more expensive. But what I'm saying is the Bob and Sue Smith who buy a house in June, the fees are what the fees are. They don't have a
Right.
chance. They can't say, I want to go back to how you, oh, yeah, okay. It just is. And oh, by the way, they're not comparing it to anything because chances are it's not like they bought a house the exact same price point 6 months ago and said, look at this is some bullshit. And so I think what you're saying with the nothing burger is probably the most accurate. Is buyers
Right.
don't even bring this up because it's like, well, I have nothing to compare to. It is what it is. Can't do anything about it. I don't even know anything other than this, right?
Right. I mean, that's just it. I mean, a lot of, if I talk to 10 people in a day, right? Like I will talk, I have 10 appointments on my calendar. Like I will talk to
Yeah.
10 people buying houses today. One person will ask me about this,
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
and it's, again, and should I be advertising and saying, hey, you're going to pay more now that it's made? No, like this
Right.
is what your rates and costs are. There's, and if for some reason the stuff gets rolled back before they close and we have good news, then more power to you.
That's right. Well, I appreciate it, man. We'll see what happens this week. And before we let you go, what with the housing market, what other releases come out this week? Is there any big things that we need to pay attention to?
Huge stuff this week. So Fed meets. So the markets are counting on a 0.25% increase in rates. So that's already been that's a foregone conclusion. So that's priced into your rates today. You're not going to see a lot of rates jump because of that. The Fed press conference right afterward is the most interesting part, and there's two pieces to that. There's the time when Jerome Powell reads the statement, and last time they met, they changed some wording in that statement from like ongoing rate hikes to further reviewing monetary policy, which showed like a softening or like more of a dovish tone. So we'll be really tuned into that that press conference after that. So that'll be Wednesday. That usually is like between 2 and 2:30. Friday we get or Thursday we get ADP or private payrolls. So that's going to give us a little bit of a look into the jobs number. Jobs comes out Friday, so that's going to be a huge market mover because as we've talked about before, the labor market is what's really driving the inflation right now. Is
Yeah.
because the Fed can't get us to fall into a recession because everybody keeps getting more jobs and getting paid more. And there's a JOLTS report came out today and showed there's still a ton of available employment. And so that's one that we're really watching. And then next week, we're going to go into our big CPI number, and we're hoping, if you look at just raw data, that this will be the big turn where we start to see shelter costs come down. So we'll see. Last time we were going to have a big turn in a CPI number, the numbers were changed. The way they were weighted were changed, and so it didn't seem that exciting. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, we have a pretty good economic calendar coming up, and this has been really in the interest rate mortgage eco nerd world. This has been the next couple weeks here are really going to be a big kind of a turning point or you and I predict, we didn't predict anything. These are people that we follow and people that we learn from. But, November was when we were really going to see a big change in rates. And we saw that. We saw rates at the end of the year down below 6%. We told everybody it's going to be a rocky road. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, and we're kind of replacing some good and some bad and things like that. We've seen rates go up since then. And I think that in May is what a lot of people are counting on as when we start to see rates start that more of a consistent downward trend. So it should be an interesting couple weeks.
So that means that the audience gets to see a lot of Steve Frost here in the next couple of weeks. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I'll be here. Weird analogies and all.
I love it, man. Appreciate you very much.
See ya.